Ladies and gents, boys and girls, welcome Tuesday, November the 7th, 2023. Hope you are all doing well. Chris Phillips here, your host of the Daily Crow of the Spurs Up Show. We are rocking and rolling here on this Tuesday. I see Bruce, John Edwards, Sir Big Spur, Ethan K, Jacob, what's going on? Also those in the Big Cock Club Discord, head over to the TDC Questions channel, the TDC Questions channel, to be sure your questions are answered there. Hunter Kelly is in the chat as well. Again, appreciate each and every single one of you guys tuning in. Brian Lattimore, I see you as well. Again, guys, thank you all so much. If you do not see the YouTube link or the show link or whatever until right before, I promise the show is coming today. It was kind of last minute. I put the link together, the thumbnail, all that good stuff. But we are here either way. We are here either way, guys. Feels good to be good for South Carolina basketball. Both men's and women's get victories. I think the entire SEC won last night. I know LSU lost to Colorado. That was really the big stunner, I think, that. And Michigan State falling to James Madison on their home floor. Those are the big stunners in college basketball night number one. But for the rest of it, par for the course, I would say. Everybody else getting the W's. We'll talk about that, guys, also. We got a jam-packed show, by the way. Jam-packed show today. Of course, into the show, we've got our daily mailbag. We'll take your questions, your comments, your voicemails, get your thoughts on everything. It's Tuesday, of course, so we'll run through SEC power rankings heading into Week 11 this weekend. And we're double dipping with our guest today, guys. We got two great conversations. Kicking us off, JC Sherbet of the Big Spur. We talk all things South Carolina, Jacksonville State. Shane Beamer's comments, look ahead to Vandy. We also talk the status of Juice Wells. Could he come back next year? That's at the tail end of that conversation. And then our good friend Jamie Shaw of On3. He took the time to join us for a full SEC basketball preview, specifically on the men's side of things. But we talk Gamecocks, of course, but the entire SEC as well. We run through his power rankings, his picks, his projections for not just South Carolina, but the entire league. So really, really fun stuff, guys, as we really dive into basketball season and we get in the weeds, the nitty-gritty, if you will, of each and every single team in the league. Guys, that being said, again, appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. Of course, it is presser day for the Gamecocks players speaking shortly. Shane Beamer will go at 1:30 as he speaks ahead of this weekend's game against the Vanderbilt Commodores. South Carolina, 2-touchdown favorites in that one. Outside of that, guys, content bleeding out of the eyeballs. Again, truly appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. Things are operating, rocking and rolling at a high level, optimal capacity, and really, that's a shout out to you guys, your love, your support, man. Without you guys, TSUS would not be what it is, what it's becoming, what our journey is taking us down. It would not be going where it's going without your love and support. So again, as you can tell, guys, I'm fired up here on this Tuesday, and fired up because we got two very, very special guests in JC Sherbet and Jamie Shaw. Let's go ahead and dive into it, guys. We'll start with JC, talking all things JSU, Vandy, everything in between. Sit back, relax, enjoy this conversation with our good friend JC Sherbet of the Big Spur. All right, guys, he joins us every single Tuesday to talk all things Gamecocks football and Gamecocks athletics as a whole. Our good friend JC Sherbet of Inside the Gamecocks of the Big Spur joins the show once again. JC, appreciate you taking the time, my friend. How are you?
Great. Good to be with you guys today.
So, JC, let's just jump right into it. And before we get on the field, we've got to start with another week, another viral moment. Shane Beamer's post-game press conference, the comments that he made. Just really quickly, your thoughts on the comments as a whole. And it raises a question for me, JC, that's bigger. Like, why do you think, do people have it out for Shane Beamer? Is it like why do you think this is a weekly thing where it's like press conference clips? I understand more is being made of it because of the real problem is, on the field, the record, whatever. And I think if the record was reversed, what have you, we're not paying as much attention to these things. But thoughts on the comments on Saturday, the opening statement, if you will, about the win, celebrating the win, those who aren't, the miserable existence comments, and then just your thoughts. I mean, have you ever seen a season in which, and I know it might be recency bias, but a season in which it's just like week after week, it feels like sometimes day after day, there's like a new thing, a new viral comment that is spreading, if you will.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things at play here. If you remember, Chris, when Will Muschamp started not winning, people they had the pitchforks. I think they had the pitchforks out for him from the beginning. I think a smaller portion of the fan base was not fired up. Will never really accept the fact Beamer's the coach, but a larger majority accept him over when they hired Muschamp. And it's probably because of Muschamp's record at Florida, to be honest with you. But if you remember Muschamp, everything he said was not right either. You know, the injury reports, especially. And I always tell the story, and it's kind of funnier now that Xavier Legette's a superstar. Xavier Legette was the number 2 receiver on that 2020 team because they just didn't have anybody else. He was young, sort of raw, sophomore, and played against Florida, played against Vandy, and then all of a sudden he disappeared. There was no more Xavier Legette. Muschamp never said anything. By the time Bobo got the job, somebody finally asked about Xavier Legette. And Bubba goes, oh, yeah, he's a really good player and got a bright future. Unfortunately, he's been out for the season since the Vanderbilt game. And stuff like that with Will just drove the fan base crazy. And then with Shane, you know, he's kind of on the other end of the thing, like super optimistic. He's going to thrive on positive energy. He's going to find a way to make it positive, that type of thing. I think that what people need to realize is coaches all determine their own brand and personality. And that's never, ever, 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 ever going to change. They can change their offensive schemes. They can change their defensive philosophy, change practice habits. They can evolve, but they are who they are. And the good ones remain who they are. They don't, because once you get them out of their comfort zone as far as who they are, you're going to lose. I mean, because then they're not being true to themselves. It's all just it's a ball of charlatans if that happens. So people just have to understand Shane Beamer's not going to change. In that part of it, he is not going to change. That's just who he is. Just like Will Muschamp is never going to give an injury report if he doesn't have to. And he's always going to say things like he's got a toe, even though he's got 10, hopefully. That kind of thing. The other part of it is the guy that visited for a reunion this past weekend. You get a real treat when Steve Spurrier is your head coach because he is who he is. And he just tells it like it is all the time. I mean, Spurrier didn't even try to really hide injuries. He's like, oh, he's got a little crack in his foot. Hopefully he'll be okay, but heck, I don't know. Maybe not. Shoot, we'll just have to see, and he would flat out just call people out. And we all remember the famous Ron Cooper press conference in 2006 up in Kentucky where they almost blew a 2-touchdown lead. And he called poor Ron Cooper in to the press conference. And surprisingly enough, Coop lasted 2 more years on the staff. But, we remember that. The special teams meltdown at Vandy in 2014 that Spurrier just kept going on and on about. That's been posted. This time, and Spurrier was just brutally honest. He's like, well, we are who we are. We're just gonna go try to play our best. And Coach Spurrier didn't really get negative. It's just who he is, and he's beloved because he didn't change. He never changed. He was always Steve Spurrier. And so I think this fan base has been kind of spoiled by that. As far as, well, that's our guy, that's how that being the most successful coach in the history of the program until someone else is as successful or more, the standard is always going to be judged by that guy. Same thing happened at Clemson with Danny Ford when he left. I mean, they fired Ken Hatfield basically because he wasn't Danny Ford. And he called him out on it. And they replaced him with Tommy West, who was more like Danny Ford, and he didn't work out. And so then they got to Bowden, and then he didn't work out. And then Dabo he's Dabo, but he won, right? And so it takes that next guy, and you see it at every school that has a legend. I think Florida fans still feel the same way about Spurrier. Why is this coach saying this? Why is this coach saying that? So it's kind of a mental thing and a comfort level, because Spurrier was so successful here. You want that comfort that your program's in the right hands, just like it was with Steve. But this guy's not talking like Steve, so that's the issue there. I don't think it's a big deal. I don't think it's a thing to do with how they played Saturday or how they're going to play this Saturday. Is it something that's pissed off fans? Yes. The part of them, some of them. Do I understand where the fans are coming from? Yeah, I just explained why. I mean, they're just kind of used to something else. But fans and everybody else media, everybody, they have to realize that he's not going to change. He may, like I said, he may change the schemes, he may change the play callers, he may change responsibilities on his staff, he may recruit different players, change practice. There's all kinds of things that coaches evolve with, but I've never seen one that's good that evolves as far as like his personality and who he is and kind of the fabric of the program and how he wants to approach things from a positivity negativity standpoint. I'll also add one more thing quickly if I can. Mm-hmm. This generation of young people, they're a little different than maybe we were growing up, right? I'm not going to say they're highly sensitive, but they're highly in tune with things because they've grown up with phones in their hands. They've seen the world. They've seen, they've seen more than maybe some of us did growing up. And they don't really thrive on the negativity because they've been shrouded and dumped with negativity just because they've had this window to the world, and the world in general, the grown-up world, is a negative place. These folks almost grew up too fast. So they don't always respond, to this ultra critical stuff. And so if you're talking about reaching the players, it's probably better, even if you piss off some fans who, are just, saying whatever, because they're not used to hearing it, or they want a different message from you. I think if you have to choose between fan base and your players, then, you err on the side of the players because you don't want to lose them. The season's not over, all that good stuff. But Beamer's not going to change. I didn't have an emotion toward it either way. I'm not saying that I would have handled the press conference that way. I'm not saying I wouldn't have. I don't want to say don't care because, my listeners and readers and all care. So I need to care, but I'm just very, very neutral about that. I just think that coaches are who they are. He's the head coach. There's some things he may change, but I wouldn't put this high up on the list of things he needs to.
And to your point, JC, the issues are not the press conference. It's on the field and what we've seen this season, although it comes after a win. And admittedly, JC, like I'm speaking to myself, you wouldn't have known that South Carolina won the football game because I said this on social media. I said it on Saturday after the game. I said it yesterday. It was a win that for some reason felt like, maybe I won't say felt like a loss. It felt underwhelming. That's what it felt like. It felt underwhelming to the game. And give Jacksonville State credit, by the way, JC. That's a great football. Like, that's a really good football team. Rich Rodriguez is one hell of a coach. They've got a really good football team. Did the game go as you expected? Because I picked an 11-point margin of victory. I did not expect Jacksonville State to have the football driving with a chance to win the game. So maybe that's kind of what threw me off. But, I mean, did you see that tight of a ball game coming? Did you think it'd be a little bit one-sided? Like, your thoughts on just the overall flow of the game and how it played out?
Well, the only game scarier was probably that Louisiana Tech game in 2017 when Muschamp was here, because that looked like it. I mean,
I think it was 16-0 or
16-0. I mean, they shut them out until the Tyson Williams.
That was the Ortre Smith game. I think he had a big game that game.
Ortre Smith had a big touchdown reception. Tyson Williams had a big run, and then Bentley threw it up to Brian Edwards, somehow came out of it a prayer, and they ended up winning.
That was Parker White's first made field goal attempt, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, and it was one of a couple game winners, I think. Yeah, but look, that was a scary game. I mean, App State in 2019 was a loss. Then it kind of unfolded that way. Gamecocks actually, I thought that game they outgained App 372 to 20. Defense out of 200 yards. I don't know. I don't know how they lost that. Helensky just kind of couldn't get it done
That
there
was
at the
another
end.
nightmare Eli Drinkwitz matchup.
Yes, yeah, it's that we'll call it the book of Eli. There got us, but it and then the Wofford debacles back in Spurrier, like what they won by 7 that year. Wofford's on the freaking 2-yard line, and I'm talking about scary as in a lesser opponent. Of course, also in 2017, a bad Tennessee team that we didn't know was that bad at the time had the ball first and goal at the 2, down 6, could not score. And Carolina, that's the last time they won at Neyland Stadium. But it felt like that. Now, I don't think Carolina. They came out with a lot of good energy. I think as the game went on, it just seemed like, with the exception of a few guys, there wasn't that energy that they were playing with. Meanwhile, Jacksonville State gained confidence as the game went on. I thought Jacksonville State had a great game plan on both sides of the ball. I think Carolina did not execute. I think fundamentals left a lot of the players on Saturday. I was talking to somebody. I was very happy for Stone Blanton getting that big play, that pick 6, and I was happy for O'Donnell Fortune getting the next interception. But those guys didn't play very well. I mean, bottom line is the body of work was not that good. I think the defense continues to have the same issues over and over and over again. Luckily, and I haven't researched who it was. Whoever had the pressure on the pick 6 is probably the unsung hero, because the kid, he was getting sacked, and the receiver was, if he did, that would have been a touchdown, And so thank God somebody got pressure and he just carelessly threw it, and that's ball game. But it just, they didn't have the type of energy and execution that you would expect. The run game, you expect South Carolina, I guess, a smallish D line, to be able to line up and run it, even with the issues on the O line. The announcers for the game kept saying how great the pass protection was. I thought when they did hold up, Spencer made some plays down the field, but I don't think they held up the whole time. Not against a team like that. But now, to Jacksonville State's credit, their schemes are way different. It is a special preparation game. I won't say it's hard as playing Wofford with the triple option and all that, but their defense and offense both, it's not something you're going to see every week. And so that's not an excuse for how they played, but it's probably a reason that Jacksonville State did give them so much trouble. And then Jacksonville State's got great athletes, I think, for that level. They're you compare them to like a Furman. Jacksonville State has a higher level athlete than maybe your normal FCS team, and of course they just transitioned up from FCS. And in these types, not under Rich Rod, but in these types of situations under other coaches, they beat Florida State and Tallahassee. They beat Ole Miss and Oxford back in the Houston Nutt era. So they took Auburn to overtime, and that was a really good Auburn team. So they've got some experience, slaying the Giants, so to speak. So the Gamecocks, very fortunate to escape with a win, considering how they played. But that also means there's a lot of improvement that has to be made for them to have a shot to do what they need to do to get to a bowl.
A win is a win is a win, JC. That's the bottom line. You snap that 4-game losing streak. As you mentioned, you kick off the month of November in this 4-game home stretch with a W, which obviously you had to have. I'll ask you this, though. Spencer Rattler was brilliant, I thought, just under 400 yards. And I say that too, JC. I will point out, maybe it's an unfair comparison because he was so good against Florida, Mississippi State, Furman, those home games, what have you. Maybe Rattler wasn't quite as locked in as those games. You saw a couple underthrown balls, but still, he was great. Xavier Legette, fantastic. The offensive line struggled. Defense did generate 4 turnovers, but had their struggles throughout the day. I say all that to ask this, JC. Do you feel like we learned anything new about this football team? Did you leave the Jacksonville State game with any new information, or was it just, okay, the things we thought about this team, it is what it is, and you carry that forward?
Yeah, nothing much. I mean, there wasn't really anybody that was new that stood out. I think we've known Xavier Legette's a pretty good player, and it kind of reinforced some things for me. And here's another thing people need to kind of considered. Dowell Loggins is coaching his butt off right now, man. I mean, there's not a lot, and I'll take you back to Steve Spurrier. When his offensive line was bad during his early years, they didn't go very far. I mean, I remember a lot of 14-7 games or 17-10 games. I remember getting shut out by Georgia at home, throwing a grand total of 7 on the board at Auburn. And this injury situation on the offensive line, Chris, this is the worst situation up front injury-wise this program's had since 1999. And that year, the Gamecocks did not win a game. So I don't know. I could sit here and critique every play call and all that, but I think he's doing a good job of scheming the playmakers he has open, and that's an important thing for an offensive coordinator. You look, what does South Carolina have? Well, they've got Xavier. They got a couple of receivers that could do some things here and there. They got Mario, and they've got 2 really good pass catching tight ends. Of course, Trey was hurt on Saturday and missed. But Josh Simon steps right in, 7 catches for 64 yards, made his share of plays. Bad offensive coordinators do not get the ball in the hands of their playmakers enough. I think we all went through that the last 2 years where we're sitting there wondering why in the heck against Georgia Juice Wells isn't targeted, or why in the heck Jaheim Bell wasn't playing and targeted and all that good stuff. Those days are over. I mean, he's making the most of what he can with what he's got. I think that's fair about Spencer. He probably wasn't quite as dialed in as, say, Mississippi State or the Furman game or even Florida, where he played magnificently. But he did enough to win the game. And his body language during the football game, Chris, was superior. It's superb. Superior's the comparison. Superb. It was outstanding. He showed a lot of leadership, even encouraging the defense and things like that. He and Debo Williams both, at times, according to some folks that were right behind the bench, seemed to be, and I'm not criticizing anybody else, but it seemed to be those are the guys that were lifting everybody up. And so that's good. That's good leadership. That's what quarterbacks do. Again, 399 yards. He's closing out. Yeah, I don't know if he'll break Dylan Thompson's record or not, but it's within reach, the single season passing yardage mark. So it's within reach. So that was a good performance by him. And another thing I'm impressed with him this year, as opposed to maybe last, and Dowell deserves credit for this, Dowell Loggins, is yes, the offense is simplified. And yes, he's not thinking as much as he was asked to last year, but it's still got a lot of pro elements, and he's still having to make reads and go through his progressions like pro quarterbacks do. And he's doing it at a higher level than I saw at any point last season. So, that's going to help him next year when he's in the league. It's going to help him get drafted. He'll be the first quarterback drafted since Todd Ellis in 1990. That's a long time. So hats off to Spencer and Dowell Loggins for, not only putting him in a system that allows him to thrive, but, getting him better at a key part of that system and the execution that big-time quarterbacks have to do.
JC, here comes the Vanderbilt Commodores, and South Carolina is looking for their 15th straight win over Vandy. You think about 15 years, JC. We've seen some really, really good Gamecocks football. We've seen some really, really bad Gamecocks football. I'll start with the fun question. Where was JC Sherbet the last time Vanderbilt beat South Carolina?
I was in Nashville. It was a Thursday night game. I wasn't living in Nashville at the time. I had just moved back to Columbia the previous year to start thebigspur.com. I was in Nashville from 2004 to 2007. I worked at rivals.com in the home office and was the national recruiting editor after about 6 months there. And but then I got approached about starting an ESPN site and Big Spur. And we wanted to go home. My wife and I at the time wanted to go home. So we went home. But we drove up for the game, and then it was Labor Day weekend, and so we were going to go. We went to Tybee. We drove all the way back from Nashville to Tybee Island, Georgia, afterwards, and sat on the beach and sulked for the rest of the weekend. But that was a frustrating football game because, Carolina had started. That was the Tommy Beecher's going to start year, and they played NC State. Believe it or not, Russell Wilson was quarterback at NC State, and Carolina's defense State went nowhere, but State was bad that season. Tom O'Brien's first or second year. So it's 13-0, and they finally benched Beecher, and Beecher never played again. They put Chris Smelly, who had started some of the back end, and Smelly leads them to like 3 late garbage touchdowns. They beat State 34-0. So they go to Vandy, who had ruined their season the year before. And that was Bobby Johnson's best team. That was his bowl team. And things just didn't go right. Carolina had no answers for Vandy on defense. Again, Smelly was under pressure all night long. And then they figured out the defense and scored 24-17. And so that was it. And that's there's been 2 stadiums I've been at as an opposing fan or whatever, where somebody's really an opposing fan's acted very inappropriately after the game and almost got their teeth knocked down their throat. That was one of them. That and Kentucky in 06. The Ron Cooper game that I mentioned earlier. Those were it's kind of funny. Kentucky and Vandy are the 2 places that that I've almost scrapped at after the game, for some whatever reason.
Vandy especially, you wouldn't expect to hear that. That seems like a pretty tame crowd, I would imagine. But
I've been to so many Vanderbilt Carolina games because I went back to Nashville in 2011, so I was there for 4 or 5 years after that. But it was I've been to a lot of Vandy games and never had a problem. But that particular night, I guess, wrong place, wrong time. Thank goodness my ex-wife was with me, because she kind of was like, you need to calm down. Had to drive to Tybee Island the next day. Said no alcohol was involved, nothing. Not, at least not on my end. But that was an exercise in restraint after that one.
So, JC, you look at this year's matchup, this Vanderbilt team, and again, like I mentioned, death taxes and Gamecocks football beating Vandy, no matter how good or bad each side is. But this Vanderbilt team specifically, I think, JC, they've been one of the more, believe it or not, disappointing teams in the SEC. When you look at how they finished last year, beat Florida, beat Kentucky, they were a 5-win team. A lot of folks, their best bet was the Vanderbilt over 3.5 total wins. A loss to UNLV early in the season derails that. They haven't won a game since, haven't won an SEC play. They've had issues at the quarterback position. They've played both Swan and Seals this season, have not really been able to settle on one guy. They don't run the football that well, 93 rushing yards per game. They throw it for about 235 yards per game. They do have 2 dynamic playmakers at receiver in Will Sheppard, Jaden McGowan. Will Sheppard, JC, 44 catches for 634 yards and 8 touchdowns on the season. But outside of that, again, JC, Vandy does not do a ton well. I'd say defensively they're okay. There should be opportunities for South Carolina. So this is a game you open up as a 2-touchdown favorite. Like, you should win the football game on paper. But you know as well as I do, JC, streaks are meant to be broken. And at some point, some year, Vandy's going to beat South Carolina. It's going to happen beyond any sense of comprehension. It's going to be an upset when it does, right? We almost saw it in 2021. Last year's game was really sloppy in Nashville. Gamecocks won the turnover battle 4-1 in an 11-point victory. What are you most looking forward to in this game? Obviously, a win is number one, but South Carolina needs to go out and play a good football game to get this victory, because Vanderbilt, obviously, they know about the streak. Clark Lee, he's a good coach. They're going to come in ready to play. They haven't had any success. Much like last year, nobody expected them to beat Florida or Kentucky. You don't want to be that team that comes into this one sleepwalking, and all of a sudden you look up in the fourth quarter and Vanderbilt's got a lead on you. You're in a tight ball game. So what you're most looking forward to in this game, in a game that South Carolina, we all feel, should come out victorious?
Yeah, man, he's not coming here scared. I'll tell you that. I mean, they're going to come in here thinking, because I think, if I'm not mistaken, Chris, because they played in week 0 against Hawaii and they won it, but it was a struggle against Hawaii at home. This is probably where they're looking at it, because Tennessee's next, and Tennessee broke one off in their hind parts last year in Nashville. They got to go to Knoxville this year as a chance to maybe get that not go winless in the league. You talked about Sheppard and McGowan. McGowan is a guy, if you do not cover him down, I'll say this: if you do not cover him downfield, he can get you. He's from Lawrence, South Carolina. He's small, but he's got world-class speed. You've got to get him on the ground. And because he's so small, sometimes he's hard to tackle. So the tackling left a lot to be desired against Jacksonville State. You got to get him on the ground. They'll also pitch him the ball to try to manufacture a running game because you're right, Chris. They struggle to run the football. If you're them, you're probably a little mad at Ray Davis, right? Because Ray's so good and Ray's from California. And so you're like, if he leaves you and goes back home, let's say he went to Stanford or Cal or Oregon State or even UCLA or something, you understand. But man, he went up the road to Kentucky. That's got to really chap you if you're Vandy. So they're missing him big time. As far as their defense goes, Auburn kind of went up and down the field on them. Auburn's not a great offensive football team. Georgia, pretty much, that was what I call a pretty score for Vandy, 37-20. But they took their foot off the gas, pretty much. Everything
point,
else.
JC, not to cut you off, but Vanderbilt allowing 255.5 yards per game through the air, 180 yards per game on the ground. So it should be kind of whatever Dabble Loggins wants to dial up. You would think both sides of the offense should be able to get going, if you will. Find that
as much as South Carolina struggled on defense, Vandy's worse. UNLV came back from 17 down to beat them out in Vegas. I don't know why you scheduled that, but anyway, but it's also one of those things. Clark Lee is a gifted defensive coordinator, and just like most coaches do when things aren't working, you could surprise attack. Maybe it's a look they're not looking for. If you can't stop the deep ball like you haven't been able to do most of the year, and Sherbert gets behind you or McGowan gets behind you, and you're down 17-0 early, that other sideline is going to be feeling chipper, and then you're going to have to go adjust. Now, I think Dowell Loggins can make adjustments a lot quicker, maybe the other side of the ball has at times, but that's a concern if there's some kind of element of surprise. And Seal, you mentioned Seals, and so they're both very capable passers. They're not. Both those kids are good quarterbacks. They're just they don't have a lot of surrounding talent. But if not, if Vandy just comes out there and plays their normal old defense and all that, it should be a big day for the Gamecocks. I think, with the exception of the two receivers that can beat you deep. Of course, we found out Jacksonville State has receivers that can beat you deep, but it's probably a better matchup. There's less things to be concerned about with all the motion and jet sweeping and perimeter play and option and stuff that Jack State ran. Vandy's more of a straightforward type attack. And, I think that the Gamecocks offense should have another really good day at home.
And the good news, JC, the game is at Williams-Brice Stadium, where Spencer Rattler and the Gamecocks offense has been electric. JC Sherbet of Inside the Gamecocks, the Big Spur. JC, last thing before I get you out of here. There's been a lot of chatter about Juice Wells and his future and his status for this season, but his future, I think, more importantly, that potentially maybe NIL could play a major role in getting him back to South Carolina. What can you tell us about that, if anything? Obviously, you run a collective, you're in the NIL space. Like, what would you set maybe the odds at, the percentage at that he returns next year? Is there a realistic path for that, or is that just kind of wishful thinking by the Gamecocks fan base at this point?
I'll answer your question like this. I don't want to put odds on it because I think it's impossible to handicap at this point, because with anything like this, there's a lot of variables. There's a lot of people that maybe get involved suddenly that weren't involved before, and all that good stuff. So you just never know. But I will say there's a realistic path towards him returning next year. I am not going to rule that out at all. And so some fans have, but I haven't gotten on the megaphone and yelled at everybody. Hey, no, that's not true. I mean, people can speculate all they want, because I don't want people to be like very disappointed if he doesn't go. I honestly think it could go either way, but there is a path for him to come back. If you look at his commercial NIL deals he has through Park Avenue, which is part of Carolina Rise, he is the I think the leader in the conference as far as number of endorsement deals. He's doing fine, and he loves playing at South Carolina. And you have to think, with this draft class is full of great receivers. You have to think that only playing in one game, or if it ends up being 3 or 4, that's probably going to bump him back. And the kid could be a first rounder. This is just an unfortunate injury that happened. So, if you follow that line of thinking, and he follows that line, I think he could be back. If not, wish him well, because I think no matter where he's drafted, the kid's going to be a pro. I think he's going to be an outstanding NFL receiver. He just may have to go in the 6th, 7th round and prove it a little more and have a little less signing bonus money when he gets there.
JC, it's fun to think about the potential of Juice Wells and Nick Harbor on the outside and potentially Lenora Sellers delivering them the football. We shall see what the future holds. JC, appreciate you taking the time. As always, my friend, can't wait to do it again next week.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay, that was JC Sherbet of Inside the Gamecocks of the Big Spur. Appreciate him taking the time as he does each and every single week to chat with us. And really interesting stuff there to close it out on the Juice Wells, the status of him, and maybe he could return next season, be wearing the garnet and black. Could we see a situation in which it's Nick Harbor on one side and Juice Wells on the other? Fun to think about, especially if they get some blocking, especially if that happens. Guys, we're going to jump into a quick break. On the other side, though, we keep the convo rolling, guys. We've got Jamie Shaw of On3 talking all things SEC hoops as the 2023-2024 season has officially begun. All that and more, guys, on the other side of this break. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow.
Muscle Dougie, ho. Muscle Dougie, ho.
Ladies and gents, boys and girls, we are back here on this Tuesday, November the 7th, 2023. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in, guys. Thank you all so much for the continued love and support. And again, I want to say thank you to JC Sherbet of the Big Spur taking the time to chat with us. Really good stuff there, talking JSU, the Vandy game, and of course, guys, like I mentioned, the Juice Wells stuff. I mean, that's something we haven't really touched on a ton in regards to odds or speculation on what he may do. And obviously, it's still up in the air at this point, but very interesting. I mean, it kind of reminds me, guys, of not to go down this tangent, down this road, because we got Jamie Shaw upcoming, but the Juice Wells thing, it's a different situation, but it kind of reminds me of Spencer Rattler last year, where it's like, and Juice could have left after last year too, but it reminds me where I was so set on, and in my mind, I knew, okay, Spencer Rattler, he's going to be a one-year thing. He's coming in, going to do his thing, ball out. He's gone to the NFL, and he surprised us all, right, by coming back. I mean, Juice Wells, we were all convinced, and I mean, if he would have been healthy, certainly he'd be gone to the NFL right there with Xavier Legette, probably a second or third rounder, maybe a first rounder, who knows. But now you look at it with NIL being a thing, it's like, why not? Why not come back? So it's going to be interesting to see what he does and the decisions he makes. And, that would probably come up in the next month and a half, but going to be very interesting and will be a huge, huge boost to South Carolina if they did get him back for next season. Guys, that being said, of course, the 2023-2024 college basketball season began last night. And as you know, for football, guys, we had the entire summer. We did SEC opponent previews, team previews, went through each and every single team. And my goal is throughout the SEC basketball season to have a representative from each and every single team and for us to get kind of a breakdown and update and outlook on these teams. But with that being said, I wanted to go ahead and do like a fully all-encompassing SEC basketball preview. And that's what we got in store for you guys today. Nobody better, one of the best in the business at what he does, our good friend, Jamie Shaw of On3 Sports. He joined us, guys. He talks recruiting. He talks national college basketball. And we talked all things Gamecocks as well as the entire SEC. So with that in mind, sit back, relax, guys. Enjoy this conversation with our good friend, Jamie Shaw of On3, as we break down all things SEC basketball. All right, guys, joining us today on the show, college basketball is officially back, and we've got on one of the best in the business to help us break down not just Gamecocks, but the entire SEC heading into 2023-2024 college basketball season. He works for On3, does national recruiting and national analysis for the game of college basketball. Like I said, guys, one of the best to do it. And a friend of this show, Jamie Shaw of On3, takes his time and graces the airwaves once again. Jamie, appreciate you taking the time, my friend. How are you? Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. I appreciate you having me. Been excited to watch your journey, I guess, over these last couple of years, the growth that you've had and everything too. So it's a pleasure to be on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, Jamie. And speaking of growth, if you will, that's what Gamecock fans are hoping to see in this year's basketball team. Obviously, year 2 of the Lamont Paris era officially begins. It's a bit of a new look roster, right? No G.G. Jackson, no Chico Carter, no Hayden Brown. A lot of new pieces have been added to the transfer portal, freshmen, what have you. Some nice returning pieces as well. But South Carolina picked to finish 14th in the league. I know in your power rankings, you had them 14th. Heck, I had them 14th. So starting with South Carolina, Jamie, when you look at the Gamecocks, what are things you like about their squad that still concern you? Do you see them being better than last year, even though they lost G.G. Jackson? And do you think there's some hope there that they could overachieve? And what do you think success looks like for Lamont Paris? It's such a tough job he's been tasked with, getting this program going and getting them out of the cellar, for lack of a better way of putting it.
Sure. So I think from year 1 to 2, one thing that you're going to see is an identity of the team. Any college coach, as they go as they are tasked to be the head of a program, whether it be football, basketball, baseball, whatever it is. You want to establish your identity within the program. I think from year 1 to 2, what you're seeing is Lamont Paris able to get guys that he wants within his program, the guys that he targets, the guys that he wants, and start to establish kind of an identity moving forward as to what this program, what he wants this program to look like. I think this team has more depth. I think, in talking with people around the program, they're excited about the players they have on the roster. They went out into the transfer portal. They went out into the high school ranks and brought in players that they are very genuinely excited about, that want to be with the program, but not only want to be with the program, they want them within the program. So I think that there's a very you're starting to see a whole lot more of that, and there's a whole lot of excitement internally around the players that they have on the team.
Jamie, speaking on individual players, obviously transfer portals, the way you build your roster, not just in college basketball, but college athletics as a whole. And South Carolina did that, right? Adding B.J. Mack from Wofford, Talon Cooper from Minnesota, Miles Stute from Vanderbilt. Any of those guys jump out to you as players you're expecting big things from? I know B.J. Mack was the one it seemed like really moved the needle over the offseason for Gamecock fans.
Well, one thing that you see with all the players they brought in is they have had varying levels of success at their previous stops. B.J. Max and Stephen Clark, both in the Southern Conference, they were top 5 leading scorers within the conference. Miles Stute was a 40% three-point shooter 2 years ago, averaged 9 a game last year at Vanderbilt. Talon Cooper, high-level assist-to-turnover ratio. I think he was nationally in the assists 2 years ago at Morehead State, then at Minnesota had some more success. So what they're bringing in is experienced players who have had varying levels of success already in college, while also still bringing in the freshmen. Now, Arden Conyers, Colin Murray Boyles, Boyles a little bit more along the way than Conyers. But Conyers, they have high upside, high hope for, same like Zach Davis last year, building within the program, growing, and then stacking it on top of more experienced guys who have seen success at the collegiate level already.
Now, Jamie, let's get to the SEC. Let's start with the Kentucky Wildcats, right? They're always a talking point. I think this is a really interesting year for John Calipari. There's tons of pressure, right? It's been forever since Kentucky has been to the Final Four and really had big-time success in the postseason. They got a couple of nice veteran pieces in Antonio Reeves, Trey Mitchell, but obviously it's going to be a slew of talented freshmen. What's the pressure like on John Calipari, in your opinion? Does he have to make a certain point to keep stay in the good graces of the Big Blue Nation? Or, it's such a high pressure job. It's a pressure cooker in Lexington, and the expectations are sky high. And I imagine they have the talent to get it done, which makes it probably all that more frustrating that they haven't been back in so long.
Yeah, there's always expectations whenever you're the head of a blue blood type of program. There's always going to be expectations, and especially in the success that he's had. He's already in the Hall of Fame still as an active coach. All the wins that he's had, national titles, the pros that he's developed and everything, there's always going to be expectations. As for this team this year, it's going to be very interesting to see how they bounce back from these last couple of years and what they have. They had the #1 recruiting class coming into this year. I believe they have 8 new faces, 1 transfer and 7 freshmen. And then they have the 2 guys. Well, I guess Antonio Reeves is the only one back, and then Trey Mitchell, the transfer coming in, who's a graduate transfer as well. So it's a mix and match type of roster, but that doesn't mean it's not void of talent. It'll be interesting to see how they get what they get out of them, because they have 3 7-footers that are currently injured, meaning that Trey Mitchell is the starting 5-man, who's a natural power forward at 6'9". But you have Aaron Bradshaw, who's a top 10 recruit coming in, Big Z from overseas, who they have high expectations for, and then Ugana Onwezu, who was a previous top 25 recruit in the last year's class. All 3 of them are sidelined with either eligibility issues that they're going through with Big Z, and then injuries with the other 2 bigs. So the talent is there. They're going to be tested early. I think next week they play Kansas. But the expectations are always going to be there for Calipari. But I think he's got a good group of guys this year that could be very interesting within the SEC.
Now, Jamie, #1 in your power rankings, the Tennessee Volunteers, and you take a look at the Vols, 3 of the top 4 scorers return, including Vescovi, who it feels like that dude has been there for like 17 years, but he is back yet again. This is a team that's had a lot of success over the last couple of years. Rick Barnes has done a great job, and last year even I think they were the number 4 seed, if I recall correctly, in the NCAA tournament. But you had them number 1 in your rankings. A lot of folks are siding with Tennessee. Why do you like the Vols so much going into this season?
Well, they had a mixture of guys coming back, along with they did a good job of the transfer portal. So I think the central figure within what they are going to do this year is Zakai Ziegler, the point guard. He's going to be brought back kind of incrementally, coming back from a knee injury that he suffered toward the end of last year. That team, as you can see, was a completely different team after he left. I think they only averaged less than 60 points per game during the NCAA tournament, even though they won 2 games and went to a third. But with him in the lineup, they're a completely different team. You bring back Josiah Jordan-James. You bring back Jonas Adu. You also add in Dalton Knecht, averaged over 20 a game at Northern Colorado last year. He's had a really good preseason. The staff is really high on him. And you also bring in Jordan Gainey from USC Upstate, who's a 40% three-point shooter, averaged over 15 points per game as well. For them, you bring him in to be able to play spot minutes and come off the bench as well at the guard. They're a big, strong, tough, physical team. They have a lot of size. You have returning players. Jemiah Meshak's one of them. Toby Owaka, who had USA experience this summer with the U19 program as well. So there's a depth there. They have depth. They have shooting. They have defense. And with Zakai Ziegler coming back, they have a point guard that you can rely on during crunch time. With all that type of stuff, the winning pedigree Rick Barnes has shown in his career, I think Tennessee is a very nice team up top of the SEC.
Jamie, switching gears a little bit in regards to the entire SEC, we're seeing on a yearly basis more SEC teams make the NCAA tournament and compete at a high level than we've ever seen before. Do you feel like there was a moment, say over the last 10 or 15 years or what have you, where it clicked, where like the investment into basketball became a greater thing? Because I mean, I'm sure you can relate. Like, we didn't grow up with Arkansas basketball being great, Alabama basketball, Auburn, like these teams that in these schools that when we hear their names, we think football, and they're putting together some of the best basketball teams in college basketball, putting some of the best products on the floor. What do you think it was that's like flipped the switch and has turned the SEC into one of the best conferences in the entire country?
I think when you look at the conference as a whole, you see some really good head coaches. We mentioned John Calipari already. He's already in the Basketball Hall of Fame. Even a school like Vanderbilt with Jerry Stackhouse, he is very well regarded amongst the coaching community with the offensive sets that he's able to run. Dennis Gates came out the gates running last year. You have Buzz Williams, Eric Musselman, Nate Oates, Bruce Pearl. The list goes on. Rick Barnes, Chris Beard. All of these guys have had success at the collegiate level and continue to have success and continue to build on what they have. So I think SEC up top with the head coaches is one of the very best in the country.
Moving to Ole Miss, let's talk about them, Jamie, because I think it's really interesting this year. Kind of a controversial, I guess you could say, hiring, or a hiring that certainly stirred some things up with Chris Beard taking over. You mentioned him. What are you expecting from him his first year in Oxford and turning around the Ole Miss basketball program?
Well, I'm not sure what to expect, really. He's had a track record of success. He put a roster together. They have 2 guys who are still waiting on NCAA eligibility from 2-time transfer guys. But I'm not entirely sure what to think of the Ole Miss program, what they do. There's somebody that I'm very eager to see what they look like on as things get kickstarted.
Now, Jamie, the bottom of your power rankings, I want to go back to those because I thought Lamont Paris, he made an interesting point at the media days in Birmingham for the basketball team and for the conference as a whole, just saying that, he was pointing out kind of the holes and none of these teams finished in these places and was kind of jabbing the media a little bit. So I'll ask you this, let's just say 11 through 14, because I feel like there's Mississippi State, and then maybe there's a little bit of a gap, and then you've got LSU, Georgia, Vandy, and South Carolina. Of those 4 I just mentioned, if you had to pick one, is there a team in that group that you could see overachieving and maybe surprising, finishing middle of the pack, or maybe even breaking through and being a top 4 or 5 team in the SEC this year?
Top 4 or 5 might be a little bit lofty. I think all of them have a story to tell. I think if things come together, obviously you have the success that Vandy had last year. They returned their best player in Tyron Lawrence this year. Georgia brought in, and LSU both brought in a lot of new players, both to the portal and in the high school ranks. And the same with South Carolina. So you're getting to be able to see Mike White and Lamont Paris and then McMahon kind of put their identity within their programs of what they want their teams to look like. And then you have Jerry Stackhouse, who came off one of the best seasons in the last 20 years in Vanderbilt history. So with those four schools, yes, I think there is a way that they could finish better than where they're projected to. And I think the SEC is a little bit open, especially toward the bottom half of it there, to be jumbled around a little bit.
Now, Jamie, for a living, you talk recruiting, obviously. So you follow these guys on their journey, starting from early days of high school, maybe even before that, and obviously to their college careers. Which players are you most excited to watch in the SEC this year? I mean, there's plenty to choose from. You go Wade Taylor at Texas A&M, the Brazil kid at Arkansas, Johnny Broome at Auburn, Grant Nelson at Alabama. Again, the list just goes on and on. Who are some of the top guys that you're most looking forward to following them and seeing and watching them emerge and blossom before our very eyes?
I think the ones that you just kind of hit on, Johnny Broome. I mean, he averaged 14 and 8 last year, leading shot blocker returning. You have Wade Taylor, was fourth leading scorer in the SEC last year at Texas A&M. They have expectations this year. Dalton Next coming in at Tennessee. I think Riley Kugel, he averaged the last half of the year, I think 14 or 15 games. He averaged over almost 15 a game as a freshman to close the season out. So it'll be interesting to see how he has. Tolu Smith's an interesting story as well. He's injured from Mississippi State, coming in, probably an all-league type of player. What type of impact will he have? How quickly will he come back? And then what type of impact will he have for Mississippi State once he does come back? I think there's a lot of individual player storylines that you can find within the SEC this year, which is going to make the conference fun to watch.
Jamie, there's a lot of talented teams in the SEC. If you had to go with a pick right now, I mean, Alabama, Kentucky, Tennessee, Texas A&M, Arkansas, I think are all very realistic options. Is there a team right now you go into the season? I know you had Tennessee #1 in your power rankings, but it doesn't always mean that's the end of season pick. Is there one that you look at that you're riding with as your pick to win the SEC this year, maybe go the deepest in the postseason?
Well, I think any of those teams that you just mentioned could. You know, they've all had head coaches who've had success in the NCAA tournament, who've had success in college basketball. You know, going all the way down, Nate Oates with what they did last year, won the SEC and SEC tournament. Bruce Pearl with his time at Auburn and Tennessee as well. You have Eric Musselman, who's been to the last, 3 Sweet 16s, I believe. You have Rick Barnes with what he's done. Buzz Williams has had success, both Virginia Tech, Marquette, and now Texas A&M. So I think any number of those teams, John Calipari, obviously, we talked about him previously, know what it takes to put a team together. They have rosters that they've assembled, and I think any of those teams could put something together on the floor to be competitive. And once the ball tips, you know, the games aren't played on paper. So once the ball tips, anything can happen.
Jamie, let's just say hypothetically I had someone that had never watched SEC basketball before, and I had to give them one team to keep an eye on this season. Maybe they're the most fun to watch or most entertaining. What would be that team in your mind that you would say, all right, if you're going to watch SEC basketball, this is the team you got to follow because they're going to be an electric factory all year long? Is there a team like that for you in the conference? And if so, who would it be?
I don't know if there's a single team that's like that. I think the entire conference is, though, because what you could see throughout the conferences on any given night, the team that's 14th in the conference could upset a top 3 team. And that can happen throughout the entirety of the conference. I mean, there's a lot of talent. There's a lot of pros. You're going to see first-round draft picks throughout the conference. So I would advise that person to watch SEC basketball because they are going to have some exciting games throughout the entirety. And it could just be on a random Tuesday night with the 14 seed versus the 6 seed, you know, team coming up and an electric game, as you mentioned.
Upsets indeed, Jamie, are why we love college basketball. Last thing before I get you out of here, the top 10 nationally looks like this. There's just one SEC team, but Kansas, Duke, Purdue, Michigan State, Marquette, UConn, Houston, Creighton, Tennessee, and Florida Atlantic round out the top 10. Are you leaning any which way in regards to picking a national champion or a Final Four? Like, is there anybody that stands out to you that, you know, you're making the preseason pick of crowning them as national champs right now?
No, I know I continue to be boring with my answers and stuff, not going out on one individual thing. But I think that's the beauty of what college basketball is starting to become now these last couple of years is there's a ton of parity. I don't think there's one individual team up at the top that can make a run. I mean, we looked just last year, 2 mid-major programs made it all the way to the Final Four with FAU, whom you just mentioned, in San Diego State. Right now in college basketball, there's so much parity. Now, there's some very familiar teams that are up top there, blue bloods and teams that have had success. But even the teams, like you said, FAU, they have possible pro talent on the roster now. San Diego State, the same way that we just mentioned last year, going to the Final Four as well. So let me wait a couple of weeks to be able to say who it looks like, to see what these teams look like on the court, and how they advance in their games. But college basketball is in a beautiful place right now, and there's a lot of parity with a lot of teams that can make a run toward the national championship.
And I'm glad you brought that up, Jamie, because the next thing I wanted to ask you was, you look at last year, and again, asking you, I feel like, when it comes to in football, it's kind of clear cut draw. Okay, these 6 to 8 teams have an opportunity to win all. College basketball, I mean, literally, who knows? College baseball is the same, but even college basketball more so. And you look at last year, and I mean, it was just nobody expected that. Nobody could have seen that coming. Do you see that as more of a one-off, or do you think that's going to be now the new yearly norm where we're not getting quite what we expect when we get to the Elite Eight, Final Four? We're going to start seeing some different names and different faces in those situations.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think I think that's the new norm coming forward as to what we can expect to be able to see. Now, there's always going to be the same schools, the blue blood type schools that are going to be in the hunt. But I think you're going to see a whole lot more mid-majors and mid-major plus and high minuses and non-traditional powers that make runs throughout the tournaments. You have guys that are staying in college for longer. You have guys that are becoming older, teams that are able to get older, especially with this extra COVID year now through the transfer portal. Guys are given extra years of college. So, they're 23, 24 years old, have continuity of playing together for a couple years and all that type of stuff as well. So I think now more than ever, you're going to see a lot of, I go back to the word parity, but you're going to see a lot of non-traditional schools that are able to find the matchups within the tournament, to be able to continue to move forward and make runs.
Jamie Shaw of On3, again, one of the best in the business, someone I'm grateful to call a friend of this show. Jamie, I promise this is the last thing, and I'll get you out of here. It's such a fun conversation every time we have you on. Let's say South Carolina this year makes the NIT, which I think will be a huge success in year 2 with Lamont Paris. If they do that, what in particular clicked for them? Is there something that worked out that you talked about the identity of the basketball team, but is there something else? Is it as simple as the transfer portal guys living up to the hype? Is it young players emerging? What worked for South Carolina to where they were able to achieve that feat?
So I think it's a number of things. I think them being able to find the offensive flow and be able to make shots and then get enough stops on the defensive end to where obviously, they outscore enough opponents on that end. But I think it's finding their offensive flow, finding the shooting, finding the shots that they want within the flow of their offense, being comfortable, finding the right people to make those shots within the flow of their offense, as well as getting enough rebounds, getting enough defensive stops to where they can keep the game in check.
Jamie, it's a pleasure to follow your work, my friend. You do a fantastic job at what you do, covering college basketball on a national level. For folks who may not be familiar, let everyone know where they can check out your work.
So check out On3, www.on3.com. All the latest breaking recruiting news, both in football and basketball, on recruiting intel and all that type of stuff. We got the National Signing Days coming up here this Wednesday too, so make sure you stay tuned to see everybody signing, all the late last second kind of commitments and everything going on there. So www.on3.com, also On3 Recruits and On3 Sports on social media.
Jamie Shaw of On3. Jamie, appreciate you doing this, man. We'll talk soon.
Chris, thank you.
Okay, that was Jamie Shaw of On3. Appreciate Jamie taking the time, and really, really excited, guys, for a action-packed 2023-2024 college basketball season. And yes, I know we're still in the heat of football season, but figure why not? Obviously, with tip-off happening yesterday, and we'll talk about that more later in the show. Of course, Gamecocks get a pair of wins. Dawn Staley's team, I mean, it's not basketball season until they kick somebody's ass, and certainly they did that yesterday. And Lamont Paris's squad, they got a big win over USC Upstate, even covered the spread in that ball game. taking down the Spartans to open a season. Guys, we'll jump into a quick break. We'll dive into SEC power rankings, then get into the daily mailbag and talk an array of topics here on this Tuesday. All that and more, guys, on the other side of this break. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow.
Muscle Dougie, ho. Muscle Dougie, ho.
Ladies and gents, boys and girls, we are back here on this Tuesday, November the 7th, 2023. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in, guys. Get this, by the way, we love to do countdowns on this show, right? We love to count down to each season, whether it be football, baseball, basketball, what have you. And a little birdie told me this morning, a.k.a. my good friends over at the 11.7 podcast, who do a fantastic job covering college baseball as a whole. Tomorrow, if the math serves me correctly, tomorrow is officially 100 days until opening day. And I see some of you talking about baseball in the chat. That's what brought this to my mind. 100 days till opening day. You think about that. Like, you think of how quickly 100 days goes by, right? I mean, we all recall where we were when we started the 100 days till kickoff. And I mean, it goes by like that. So to think there's only 100 days until opening day, which means, guys, there's about, 60 days, maybe 70, about 70 days until we start talking about and previewing SEC baseball. Like, that's not that long, right? 2.5 months. It's you see the smile on my face. You guys know I'm a huge baseball guy, so it brings me an immense amount of joy to think about that. Baseball season is just around the corner. We got baseball, we got basketball, we got football, man. It feels good when all the sports are kind of going simultaneously, and it's a lot of fun. So either way, guys, we keep the show moving. Like I mentioned, we are going to talk some basketball today. We're going to highlight that in the daily mailbag segment. I'm sure many of you out there have comments, have questions. Guys, continue to flood the chat, whether you're on YouTube, you're on Facebook, what have you. You can also call and leave us a voicemail at 843-790-3377, or you can text that number as well. We'll get into all of your questions, your comments, your voicemails in our daily mailbag segment in the last 30 minutes or so of this show. But with that being said, guys, it's Tuesday, and every single Tuesday, we dive into my SEC Power Rankings. And these are the Power Rankings entering Week 11 of the 2023 college football season. And we start in the cellar at number 14, South Carolina's opponent this weekend, the Vanderbilt Commodores. You talk about a football team that has not won a game in quite some time. It is Vandy. And of course, guys, as you all know by now, I picked Vanderbilt against Auburn this past weekend in the upset. Had them over the summer, right? Try to get ahead of it. Let's see, where could I pick a big upset? Maybe we're going to nail an upset here, there, whatever. I did pick Vandy to beat Auburn, and I felt like, you know what? Let's just stick with this, right? Maybe Clark Lee and company, maybe they've got some tricks up their sleeve. They can do the unthinkable, what have you. And I was wrong. I'll eat crow for that, no doubt. Vanderbilt football team, obviously, against South Carolina, has 14 straight wins against them, going for their 15th consecutive win over the Commodores. I still think it's a dangerous team. We'll talk about this more throughout the week, guys, as we preview the game. But Vandy, obviously, guys, you haven't won an SEC ball game. You haven't won a game in what feels like forever. They stay in that number 14 spot. A lot of issues for Clark Lee's team. At number 13, guys, I've got the Mississippi State Bulldogs. And I don't know, guys, I don't think, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think State and Vandy play this year. I wish they did, though, because the Battle of Mid is putting it kindly. Like, the greatest pillow fight in SEC history would be the battle between Mississippi State and Vanderbilt. And I mean, to be fair, right, and Zach Arnett, you're doing all this without Will Rogers. You don't have Woody Marks. It's a really tough situation. But they got beat down by Kentucky on their home field by a final score of 24-3 this past weekend. So just tough sledding in Starkville, guys. And it's the tough season that we sort of all expected Mississippi State to have following the passing of Mike Leach late last year, the unfortunate passing, if you will. But Mississippi State football will get back. They'll come back, be back on the rise, but just the transition. I think the transition was something they were never going to be able to overcome and do it successfully. And so it's been really, really tough sledding for State, especially without their starting quarterback and their star running back as well. At number 12, guys, I've got the South Carolina Gamecocks. Gamecocks move up a slot. Again, this feels right. I mean, for a football team that struggled to beat Jacksonville State, a win is a win is a win. Nobody's taking that away. And could South Carolina win out and make a bowl game? I think it's possible. I mean, I think we've seen crazier guys beating Tennessee and Clemson back-to-back last year after losing to Florida 38-6. was far crazier than if you told me South Carolina reeled off 3 more wins in a row and got to a bowl game. I mean, that'd be crazy, but it wouldn't even compare, I think, to what happened last year. So South Carolina at number 12, you move up one spot, but again, a lackluster performance, a game in which, if not for Stone Blanton's heroics there, who knows? Does JSU punch it in there? Do they go in and score and take the lead? And we're talking about a South Carolina loss to the first-year FBS school in Jacksonville State. Either way, a win is a win is a win. You move up one spot, but still a lot of problems with this football team. And again, I think a game in which, guys, as I've mentioned before, I don't think we learned anything new about South Carolina in that football game, right? We didn't take anything away that was groundbreaking, earth-shattering information. South Carolina just is what it is at this point. At number 11, guys, I've got the Florida Gators. Florida ahead of South Carolina, of course, because they beat them, but a really, really tough loss for Billy Napier and the Gators to the Arkansas Razorbacks. It's just, like I said before, it's every time Billy Napier and this Florida program, they take a step forward, it's like they have to take 2 backwards. And you talk to Gator fans, I mean, guys, when you're talking about a team that cannot even get 11 players on the field for a special teams play, that's a problem. Like, you have some serious issues. And I understand it, right? Because it's one thing to go out and get beat, right? You get beat, fine. It happens, right? Winning is hard. You play good teams. These other SEC teams, even when they're like Arkansas, guys, Arkansas has talent. We know that. They cut out Dan Enos, and all of a sudden the offense is clicking. They got it rolling. Like, these other teams have talent, but when you're doing things that are just flat out stupid, when you're playing like a stupid football team, which is what Florida does a lot, I get the frustration of those fans in Gainesville. I totally understand it. So a really tough loss. And now all of a sudden, you know, we talk about South Carolina, their bowl chances. I think the Gamecocks are more likely to make a bowl game than Florida is when you look at what they've got left on the schedule with LSU, Missouri, and Florida State. I mean, it's going to be tough sledding in all 3 of those games. So Florida at number 11, the fight for bowl eligibility is on for Billy Napier and the Gators. At number 10, we just mentioned them. I've got the Arkansas Razorbacks, who were at number 13 for us last week. All the credit, I mean, an immense amount of credit goes to Sam Pittman, KJ Jefferson, Rocket Sanders, that entire Arkansas team for rallying the troops, right? You make the tough decision. We got to fire Dan Enos. And I tell you this, you watch that game against Florida and what that offense did, just reeling off big numbers. And I tell you, it makes you think, guys, man, what if they'd have done that sooner? Or what if they just did not hire Danny Enos? Like, it just like, man, what could have been this season? What could have been with KJ Jefferson and Rocket and the rest of that offense? So a huge win. It felt like somewhat of a breaking point for Sam Pittman, right? I mean, it's you've lost 6 in a row. The fan base is ready to move on. And it just kind of shows, though, how quickly things can turn, that now there are some of those out there that are on Razorback message boards talking about, I knew it all along, Sam Pittman, he's the answer. And they were probably some of the same folks that 2 or 3 weeks ago were saying he needed to be fired. Again, that's every SEC fan base does that. I'm not calling anybody out, but big time win for Arkansas. I picked the Arkansas Razorbacks, guys, straight up. It felt like a game in which, you know, again, at some point, Arkansas just has too much talent to go winless in the SEC and to lose that many consecutive games in a row. So congratulations to Sam Pittman and the Hogs. Huge win, and a win they desperately needed to have. At number 9, I've got the Auburn Tigers. Guys, Auburn getting a comfortable win over Vandy. You know, I don't think Auburn's world beaters, but I tell you this, when I watch Auburn and I look at Auburn, I think the fact that Hugh Freeze is their head football coach matters, right? They're a well-coached football team. You know, I think they're about where most of us expected this season. I thought they'd probably be about a 6 or 7 win team, maybe 7. They've got 2 more, 2 or 3 more? I have to look at the schedule. Either way, a couple more opportunities left to get to a bowl game, boost up that win total. Obviously, the Iron Bowl end of the season, but they are like the opposite of a South Carolina, for example. The offense stinks. The defense is really good. And it kind of goes to show you what Vandy's got, too, on the defensive side, because Auburn, heck, they look like a well-oiled machine in that football game. So, you know, all of a sudden you look at the offense, and guys, once Hugh Freeze, once he gets his quarterback, it's going to be a lot of fun to watch Auburn football and the growth and the progression of his tenure in the era there. But again, I've got Auburn 9, not world beaters, but I think they're a solid football team. I think Auburn's a solid team. That was a nice win over Vandy, and we'll see if they can build off of that. At number 8, I've got the Texas A&M Aggies. Guys, another tough loss. And it feels like it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when on Jimbo Fisher. The clock is ticking, right? His 4th loss on the season. I mean, guys, they might not be done. They got to play LSU. Like, they've still got some tough games down the stretch. They might be going 7-5 again. You also have to question the buy-in of the football team. Like what is the psyche of the football team? They hear all the chatter too when it comes to Jimbo Fisher. Like, are they a team? And I mean, we saw last year, guys, the culture's not all that great, right? I mean, you had guys smoking weed in the locker room and kind of mailing it in. I mean, the culture is not as good as it could be. We'll just say that. So, 4 losses now for Jimbo. And I don't think saying, well, we lost our starting quarterback. I don't think that's going to be enough to save Jimbo Fisher's job. I think we're going to be talking about in a couple weeks. I think we're going to be talking about Jimbo Fisher getting the boot. I don't think money is an issue in college football, especially at a place like Texas A&M in College Station where they got oil money. They got money to throw away down there in College Station. So I think that's what's going to be happening. And at number 8, I've got Texas A&M, guys. Massive, massive disappointment this season. Number 7, I've got the Kentucky Wildcats. Kentucky disposing of Mississippi State. No big deal, no problem, what have you. I've gotten a lot of questions about why is Kentucky so high here? And they're going to have an opportunity this weekend, by the way, against Alabama to, I don't think anybody thinks Kentucky's going to win the football game, but at least give Bama a scare and build some momentum going down the stretch. Of course, next weekend, they've got the Gamecocks. We now know that is a night game at Williams-Brice Stadium. I don't know if I just slightly favor Kentucky this year, admittedly, guys. I don't know because I built them up in my head in the preseason. I mean, I don't think Kentucky is an elite-level football team. They're not quite as good as I thought they would be, but I like what I'm seeing from Devin Leary of late. Ray Davis is one of the best running backs in the SEC. They still feature 2 of the best wide receivers in the SEC, and that defense is tough as nails. So we'll see. We'll see with Kentucky. They could lose out, guys. They could lose out. They got Bama, South Carolina, then they got Louisville. They could very well lose out. It's going to be a really interesting finish to this end of the season for Kentucky because this is a team, still lots of talent, but, have they really lived up to it? I don't know that you can say that they have. So a nice win over Mississippi State, beating the hapless Bulldogs, but now they get a real serious test against Alabama. At number 6, I've got the LSU Tigers. Guys, speaking of Alabama, that great game of the weekend, LSU and the Crimson Tide going to battle in Tuscaloosa. And I went with LSU to win the football game, and I was wrong. I doubted Nick Saban. That was silly. He made me eat it. He made me eat crow. It did not taste good, but here we are. I just can't believe how bad LSU is defensively. Like we knew that was going to be a high-scoring game. I took the over in that game. That felt like such an easy play. But LSU's defense, it's inexcusable how bad it is. It's insane how bad that defense is. That offense, historically good, it's crazy. I mean, you think about what could have been for LSU if they had a defense that was just worth a damn, right? And it really goes to show you how much college football has changed when you're watching LSU and Bama, and it's this 42-28 game. It's no longer 9-6 or 10-7, whatever. The Jaden Daniels injury, guys, did it affect that game? I mean, sure, but I think Bama had that one in control, would have won the game either way. LSU is still a good football team. Not going to penalize them too much for losing to Alabama at Alabama, but disappointing, especially when you factor in many, including myself, picked LSU to win the SEC West. And, Nick Saban continues to prove why he is the GOAT in the SEC. At number 5, I got the Missouri Tigers. Guys, Mizzou, I only dropped Mizzou down 1 slot. I mean, you go on the road, take on Georgia, go toe-to-toe with them, tied at halftime, give them a fight all 4 quarters. I'm not going to drop you all that much, man. I mean, I think if anything, Missouri only reaffirmed that they're for real. They only reaffirmed they're legit. They only reaffirmed they're a force in the SEC this season. So, you can look at the numbers and kind of pick it apart. Oh, Brady Cook wasn't that great. I thought he actually played pretty decently going up against that Georgia defense. you just ran into a buzzsaw in Athens. And that's why we talked about, guys, Georgia's schedule and, how favorable it is in the sense that most of their tough games are basically all of them are in Athens, which is yet again the case this weekend. So Missouri, we bumped them down a spot, but I thought they only reaffirmed that they're for real this season. So Missouri at number 5. At number 4, I've got the Tennessee Volunteers. Big win over UConn, ho-hum, whatever, 59-3, the final in that one. What the fun part about this is number 4 and 5 are going to play each other this weekend. So Tennessee and Missouri, they will do battle this weekend. I believe in Como that game is. So, which is going to be a really, really fun game. And a game, guys, over the summer, I picked Missouri to win. And at that time, that was considered like a massive upset. Now, I think Missouri's the favorite in the game, right? So, that one's going to be a lot of fun. Really interesting, that battle between Joe Milton, Brady Cook. But, I still like Tennessee a lot. They had a bump in the road early in the season with that loss to Florida, but they've been really, really good since. So, outside of the loss too to Alabama. But again, no shame in losing to the Crimson Tide on their home field. So at number 4, the Tennessee Volunteers. At number 3, I've got the Ole Miss Rebels. Guys, it's I don't know if it's because, and I've mentioned this many times, but I don't know if it's because Ole Miss isn't like a flashy national brand or they don't have incredible history and tradition, but like, I don't think we're talking about Lane Kiffin's team enough. Like this is a really, really good football team. And admittedly, I thought they would blow out Texas A&M. I thought that game would be much more one-sided than it was. Give credit to the Aggies and Jimbo for, for making that a fight, if you will. But, Ole Miss, they just keep on keeping on. Now, they got a stiff test this weekend, right? They already failed the first one in regards to going up against an elite-level competition when they took on Alabama. Now they got to go to Athens, to Georgia. But I tell you what, I cannot wait to watch that one because if there's anybody who can give a team like Georgia some major headaches, it's Lane Kiffin. I cannot wait to see what Lane has up his sleeve this weekend. Ole Miss, Jackson Dart, Quinshon Judkins, that team right there, man, they are dangerous. That's probably the most dangerous team in the SEC, are the Ole Miss Rebels. Number 2, guys, the Alabama Crimson Tide. I guess we should have never doubted them. I mean, the progression of that football team from the South Florida game to now is you can't say enough good things, guys. I mean, it's watching Jalen Milroe in that football game carry the football 20 times, rush for 4 touchdowns in that game. And then maybe most impressive, Alabama, when they wanted to run the football and they wanted to ice the game and they wanted to put it away, they did what elite teams do. They said, hey, we know LSU knows we're going to run the football. We're going to do it anyways, and we're going to do it successfully. And they did that in that fourth quarter and iced that game. And so, Alabama, are they going to beat Georgia in the SEC title? I have no idea. I don't know. And that matchup's not quite solidified yet, but we know what it's going to be, right? It's going to be Bama, Georgia. Are they good enough to beat Georgia? Maybe. Maybe it's going to be one hell of a contest, one hell of a matchup. But, to see the way this Bama team, how far they've come from the Texas game and then from the South Florida game to watching them beat up on LSU on Saturday night, incredible coaching job by Nick Saban and his entire staff. And at number 1, guys, the Georgia Bulldogs. And my friend Brad Crawford made this point over the summer, and he reiterated this point this week. But I tell you this, guys, Jaden Daniels goes down with an injury in that game against Bama. They lose that game, right? What is the status of Daniels moving forward? I bring him up because when you talk about the Heisman Trophy conversation, if you don't have a ticket on Carson Beck, that's a good one to have. That's a really, really good one. And I was actually asked, by the way, by a buddy over the summer, Chris, who do you like? Should I put money on Spencer Rattler? I said, I don't think he's got the team around him, unfortunately, to help him do it. But I'll tell you this, Carson Beck, the quarterback on the number 1 team in college football, he's got an embarrassment of riches around him. The wide receiver position is deep. I mean, guys, Carson Beck is on pace to set the single-season passing yards record at Georgia. I mean, this dude just week in, week out, you look at the numbers. He's throwing for 270. He's throwing for 290. He's throwing for 330. Like every single week. And he's not turning the football over. Again, that was a great win by Georgia. That was a good Missouri team they played. And Georgia just finding ways to win. I still just wonder, though. They're so good at halftime adjustments. But I wonder, is that going to come to bite them in the rear end? Like at some point, is Georgia going to get into a hole they can't get out of? Going to be interesting to see. And they got the big one against Ole Miss this weekend, then at Tennessee. So over the next couple of weeks, guys, we're going to really continue to learn, I should say, about this Georgia team. But for now, they remain number 1 in our power rankings heading into week 11 of the college football season. Guys, that being said, we're going to jump into a quick break. On the other side, we'll get into your questions, your comments, your voicemails, our daily mailbag segment here on this Tuesday. Guys, all that and more on the other side of this break. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow.
Muscle Dougie, ho, Dougie, ho. Muscle Dougie, ho, Dougie, ho.
Ladies and gents, boys and girls, we are back here on this Tuesday, November the 7th, 2023. I'm not sure if y'all caught that. Was just tuning into some of Shane Beamer's comments ahead of Saturday's game against the Vanderbilt Commodores. Shane Beamer confirming Trey Knox is questionable for Saturday's game against Vandy. Also, DeCarrion Joyner will be out with an injury, his ankle, I believe. So, that is the latest injury update, at least of what we heard. And again, Shane Beamer will continue to speak to the media today. But with that being said, we got your questions, your comments, and your voicemails here on this Tuesday. With that being said, let's go ahead and get right into it. Let's see. Ruben Nation says, has Chris quit wearing his gear or South Carolina gear? Did I miss something? No, Rumination, you didn't miss anything. I just like to keep you guys on your toes. I've still got it all in my closet. I promise I didn't burn it or something or throw it away. I just like to keep you. Yeah, he says the rumor's about to start. Now he can't even wear Gamecock gear. Yeah, per sources. It's crazy, man. You'd be surprised the powers that be, what they can do. No, I just like to keep you guys on your toes, man. Just like to keep you guys on your toes. Anyways, 843-790-3377. Texting in is a great way to make your questions stand out, guys. Rumination says Vandy has a lot of plays, big plays, over 20 yards this season. Yeah, I thought it was interesting, too. Shane Beamer actually mentioned that Vanderbilt is second in the SEC at forcing turnovers. But the problem is they've turned it over a lot themselves as well. Chuck Burkett says Nick Harbor is going to be a great player, but Lord, his blocking on the edge and perimeter has to improve to benefit the running game. Chuck, I mean, I would agree, obviously, to play the wide receiver position, you need to be able to block and be a force out there physically. But, I mean, his bread and butter is going to be going downfield making big plays. I don't expect Nick Harbor to be some crazy, well-rounded wide receiver, if you will. And I don't say that in a negative. I think the reason you wanted to sign him was to make big plays down the field. So, Gamecock fan 23 says Dawn doing what she just does best, beating a top 10 team by 29 and putting 100 on the board. Yeah, no, it was great results last night. I mean, again, guys, ho-hum. I mean, what would you expect? Do you expect anything less from what Dawn Staley's team does, taking down Notre Dame? They got a star freshman. And when you recruit the way that they do, guys, it's reload. It's not rebuild. So, obviously, preseason ranked 6th in the country. I saw some Caitlin Clark highlights from Iowa, so they're still going to be a big force. Even though LSU lost last night, I still think LSU, they're going to be a team down there down the stretch. So it's going to be a lot of fun to watch this season. And also, guys, of course, what Lamont Paris's team did, I thought was impressive. You know, we talked about the transfer portal, guys like Stute and Cooper and Mack. And, I mean, they're going to be depending on those guys. And, of course, Michie Johnson as well. You know, I'm not somebody, guys, that's going to watch a game like that or look at the box score and overreact to, you know, to beating USC Upstate by 29 points. I mean, it's a nice win. It's a really nice start, but let's see how the season progresses, right? I will say, though, that's a game that last year South Carolina wasn't beating teams they were supposed to beat by that type of margin. So, as good a start as you could ask to year 2 of the Lamont Paris era. And, guys, I think you saw last night, too, what we talked about yesterday, that, yes, you lost GG Jackson and some others, but this roster, I think, is by far deeper. And it's without a doubt more experienced. I mean, the numbers say that it's actually 4 times as experienced as it was last year. So, a great way to start the year. And Gamecocks, their next game, the men, they will take on Virginia Tech on Friday in a tournament. I believe that's in Charlotte, North Carolina. So that'll be a lot of fun for sure to see how they play out. But great start of the season for both the men's and the women's. Brad Perkle says this on that note. I know it's only one game, and it was USC Upstate, but hitting 12 threes and shooting 54% from behind the arc was impressive. Yeah, Brad, I mean, again, I think that you added some big-time shooters for sure. And, again, you added guys who had success at their previous stops, right? I mean, that's the big thing you didn't have last year. You just didn't have a bunch of experience. And your top guy, you were relying on a true freshman to figure out college basketball and to get his feet wet. And, you know, again, for everything good that GG Jackson did, I do think this team is going to be better off moving forward with the veteran pieces they added to the portal. And I think you saw that last night. But again, it's just one game. It's USC Upstate, right? It is what it is. So we'll see. We'll see. I mean, a lot of teams in the SEC looked really, really good last night. Again, I'm not trying to downplay the victory or anything, but I'm also not going overboard and saying this is an NCAA tournament type of team. And, you know, I had somebody on social media this morning get upset about, why'd you pick this record? Like, how dare you? I mean, guys, it's going off of what we saw last year. I mean, there's still question marks. There's still questions, even with the portal edition. So we'll see. I mean, I'd love to see nothing more than South Carolina make a big run this season, but successful start for both the men and the women. Again, getting back into your questions here. Let's see. The uniforms. Cody says that the uniforms on Saturday yet again made 0 sense. Well, they were the Black Magic throwbacks, Cody. So, I mean, I think that's why you saw those units. I had no problem with them. Yeah, I mean, I had no problem with them. So, I'm just glad to see South Carolina wearing black jerseys. It's fun to see the Gamecocks rocking black jerseys. Luke RJ, hoping the Courtcocks make the NCAA tournament. I do not think that is realistic for this year. I mean, I'd love to be wrong, but I don't think it's realistic for this year. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see. It's a lot of basketball to be played. So, guys, I do want to get into this, by the way. I wanted to just mention this. Like, you guys have seen it on social media, right? Because of the Shane Beamer convos or the Shane Beamer chatter in his press conferences and how it seems like every presser, there's a clip going viral. That's what I'm trying to say. There's been a lot of talk for some reason about Steve Spurrier and the way that he spoke to media. And, Steve Spurrier was far from perfect, right? Nobody's saying he is. And I respect the heck out of former players and their commentary and their opinions. And obviously, guys, they lived it, right? I mean, they lived it. So when a guy like Mike Davis, right? Mike Davis 2.0, right? Not the OG Mike Davis, but Mike Davis that played 2013, 2014, et cetera. When a guy like Mike Davis speaks, and then a guy, of course, our good friend Steven Garcia speaks, and former players speak on Steve Spurrier and their experiences with him and the way that he spoke to the media and spoke about the team or what have you, you listen and, you take that into account because obviously, again, those guys were in the locker room. I'm saying all of that to say this, though. I'm seeing a lot of Steve Spurrier slander on the timeline, and I just can't get down with it, guys. I cannot get down with it, and it blows my mind that there are people out there that are tearing down Steve Spurrier to make points about certain things, about press conferences or this or that or what have you. I can't get on board with it, man. I can't get on board with the Steve Spurrier slander that I'm seeing. And it's just, I know the exit was difficult. It was not good. It was ugly. The exit was ugly. I understand that. But Steve Spurrier provided me as a Gamecock fan the best memories I'll probably ever have cheering for South Carolina football. And so no matter the exit, no matter how it played out at the end, I can't get on board with it, guys. I cannot get on board with the Steve Spurrier slander. I can't do it because every damning thing you want to say, and especially those who, again, are taking shots at Steve Spurrier to try to make a point, which is do you. But I can't get on board with it. I cannot get on board with trashing someone who is the greatest coach in school history. I can't get on board with bashing someone who gave me the best memories I've ever had as a Gamecock fan. I just can't do it. And listen, if you want to do that, hey, freedom of speech, do you. I mean, literally, do you. I'm not saying the beauty isn't in the banter. Do you, but I can't get on board with it, guys. I just can't get on board with it. I can't. I can't do it. I can't do it. So if you want to hold a grudge, that's fine. But guys, as I've mentioned many times, holding a grudge, it only hurts the person that's holding that grudge in the end, right? Steve Spurrier is back at Florida doing his thing. He's rich. He don't give a damn what you think about him, right? I mean, if I'm Steve Spurrier, I'm thinking, okay, my exit sucked. The way I did things is questionable. But how dare you speak on my name the way you have when I gave you everything I had and gave you the best memories and by far the best run that your school has ever had. I'm not on board with it, man. I'm not on board with it. So I wanted to point that out because I'm seeing a lot of Spurrier slander, man. And I think it's, I know Mike Davis is a former player, man. And like, I respect his opinion. And obviously nobody knows more than him because he was in the locker room. But I also think that's a weird move, man. Like, Steve Spurrier gave you an opportunity to play. Like, he gave you an opportunity to play college football at the University of South Carolina. Going on record slamming that dude and it's very well documented that there's sour grapes between Mike Davis and Steve Spurrier. But man, using your platform to try to slam him and trash him, that's, again, do you, man. Do you. I can't get on board with it. I can't get on board with it, man. As far as I'm concerned, the greatest memories of my Gamecocks fandom have come because of Steve Spurrier. That's it. They have come specifically because of him. I am nothing but grateful to Steve Spurrier. Nothing but great. I remember, guys, when it happened. I remember the day he resigned, and like, I wasn't even upset then. I mean, I just was like, it sucks. It's unfortunate, but man, it was emotional because you knew the good times were over. You knew officially it was over. It was done. So I just, it was an ugly exit, man, but I can't get on board with trashing the greatest coach in school history. I just can't do it. I just cannot do it. Anyways, guys, 843-790-3377. If you guys would like to chime in via text, you can do that. Going back through the questions here. Bruce says, on offense, we got to shore up the offensive line and get a running back to help Mario out. If he comes back and develops Harbor and other receivers, and hope Sellers can ball out. Yeah, I mean, taking care of the offensive line is going to be number one. That's the number one priority over the offseason. I mean, I think you need to go to the portal. I mean, the portal's a massive priority, and get a couple game changers. I think you need a couple guys in the offensive line. I think adding a receiver or two would be beneficial. Adding a running back, obviously, would be beneficial. And I mean, guys, I don't think it's too bold to say the transfer portal is going to really decide what the 2024 season looks like. It just, bottom line, because it gets no easier. It gets no easier, right? Let's see. Landon, wonder how the new pitching coach is going to do this year. Yeah. It's going to be fun, man. It's kind of interesting. The Yardcocks this year, looking way too far ahead, talking baseball. It's like the opposite of last year, where pitching was the strength, hitting was the question mark. This year, I think you look at this team and it's more likely hitting is the strength, and pitching is now all of a sudden the question mark. So, yeah, we'll see what that holds for sure. Let's see. Shane Beamer says that he stands by what he said in the post game. He says that what it boils down to is that he hopes the fans left Saturday's game happy. He adds that sure, there can be disappointment, execution, and whatnot, but he is going to be happy about the win. Cannot wait to hear the actual comment. But again, I don't want to keep beating a dead horse, man. Like, it is what it is. You said what you said. Move on, win games. That's it, right? The post game, we have admittedly talked way more post game press conferences than I thought we ever would. So yeah. Billy Cotton says we need to go back to portal, get Division I players, not Division II players. Coaches are going to be bottom line. I don't know exactly what you mean, Billy, in the last section there, but either way, Billy makes a good point though. What's interesting about this portal cycle is, like, after you beat Tennessee and Clemson guys, and you just get the benefit of the doubt, right? So Shane Beamer can go out there and the Gamecocks can go out there and they can get a portal guy from Yale and from Mercer and from Charlotte and from Division II, and nobody's going to bat an eye. Oh, Shane Beamer can do no wrong. Like, if he identifies them as great, then they're great. I don't think you have that luxury this portal cycle. Like, you need to go out and get some proven guys. Like, you're going to have a hard time, convincing the fan base that it's okay. This lineman we got from this FCS school, he's going to be good enough. Like, nah, we need some surefire things. Like, you rolled the dice this past portal cycle, and it didn't work out well. So you need to go get some surefire things. You need to go get some surefire contributors, right? So I do think there's more pressure in this portal cycle than what we saw last year. No question. No question. So we'll see. I mean, it's fun because that's what's made college football like a year-round thing. Like the portal never stops. The portal never stops. It never stops. So Big Wash says, Chris, we may need to hire you as the coach. I'm good on that, Big Wash. I'm good on that. Yeah. Oh, Chuck, that's a good point too. Needs a new defensive coordinator. Yeah. I think there'll definitely be staff changes made. I don't see how you could get through this season or get through this offseason and not make staff changes. And I think we're going to see multiple, guys. I do. I think we're going to see multiple. So anyways, guys, 843-790-3377. Shane Beamer says that Juice Wells is most likely out on Saturday, and his status will remain the same until Beamer says otherwise. Big Wash says, why not? You seem to know what the program needs. Well, Big Wash, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out this team needs talent, and they needed the portal. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that they need a new defensive coordinator. Would you disagree? You tell me, Big Wash. I will not apologize for not blindly trusting the process. I give my opinion. I give my take. Doesn't mean I want to be the head coach. Doesn't mean I think I should be the head coach. But we all have our opinions on what South Carolina needs. We all have, Big Wash, we all have the same aspirations for Gamecocks football, which is seeing them win and win big. We might have differing opinions on how to get there, but that's the beauty of life and the world is we can all have opinions. Yeah, the comments on Juice Wells, guys. I mean, I think Juice Wells is done. I think Juice Wells is done for the year. Will he come back next year? That's the big question. Will he come back next year? So, yeah. Anyways, 843-790-3377. Billy Cotton says, tell me if you found any joy. I have found some joy. I am very joyous on a day in, day out basis. So very joyous. Let's see. Bruce says, I think we can beat Vandy. They're worse than us, but I expect it to be a battle to the fourth quarter, then pull away late. Yeah, I'm obviously, guys, I'll drop my score prediction Thursday. I'm very curious as to how this one's going to play out. Like, is it going to be a closer ball game? I mean, it's on one hand, you're like, man, Vandy's terrible, right? They're no good. But then you look at the Jacksonville State game, and I mean, realistically, guys, would you say JSU has more talent than Vandy? I mean, would JSU beat Vandy? I don't know. Maybe they would. Maybe they wouldn't, though. I don't know. You know what I mean? So it's tough to say. I mean, really, truly, genuinely, it's tough to say. It's going to be a very, very interesting ball game. No doubt. No doubt. Let's see. Gamecock fan says, I found joy at the score of 100-71. Yeah, that was a total beatdown. Total beatdown. M. Colt, the overall odds show that Vandy is overdue for a W. Seems like the perfect storm. I mean, M. Colt, to your point, Vandy's going to beat South Carolina one of these years. They are. It probably should have been 2021. But Vandy is going to get it done at some point, and it doesn't matter what year it is, it's going to be an upset. So, of all the years, I mean, this one could be it. I don't know. You know what I mean? And the fallout, if that happens, as we all know, will be brutal. Absolutely brutal. Does it feel likely that South Carolina is going to get the job done? I mean, they're 2 touchdown favorites, but Maybe this year is it. I don't know. But it is interesting how you look at the streak, and it doesn't matter how good or bad South Carolina is. It doesn't matter how good or bad Vandy is. The Gamecocks just find a way to beat Vanderbilt. So I know you're talking about the odds. The odds say that South Carolina is probably going to win the football game. Let's see. Cleats in the grass, or in the ground, I should say. Is this Rattler's last season? And if so, what do you think Beamer will do with less of a quarterback? Well, that's a great question. What will Dowell Loggins do with not Spencer Rattler? I'm not going to say less of a quarterback because who knows what Lenora Sellers might be in year one. I think we all assume that's going to be who's the quarterback's going to be, Lenora Sellers. But that'll be the big question, I think, cleats on the ground going into next year, is what does Dowell Loggins do with a different QB, right? What does he do? But the offensive issues, man, I mean, Rattler's bailed this team out, no question. And that'll be a big question mark, right? The quarterback battle. But fixing the offensive line, that's the priority for this football team. That's the priority. That's what they got to get figured out. Guys, we've hit 2:00. Appreciate you all so much. Thank y'all, guys. If you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell icon so that you get notifications of when we go live and we drop new video content as well. Also, guys, be sure to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast. Podcasts drop daily at 5 p.m. Eastern. Guys, stick around too. The post-game call-in show will happen Saturday following the game. I'd say around 3:30 or so after the Gamecocks and Commodores do battle. And of course, guys, stay tuned to social media content bleeding out of the eyeballs there as well. Guys, appreciate you all tuning in. Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, and we will talk to you all tomorrow.